Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm registered dietitian and your host, Jesica Wilson. Today is part 2 of my conversation about sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, also known as soda taxes. Part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Brownell, professor emeritus at the Sanford School of Public Health Policy at Duke, was a couple weeks ago. Because this episode didn't get to touch on multiple talking points from Dr. Brownell, including the paper about white supremacy in food systems, I look forward to bringing a part 3 later on. Today's episode is with 2 folks who work in public health, Blake Flaugher and Raeann Bowlds. I asked them for this follow-up conversation to explain to me how public health works. After my conversation with Dr. Brownell and looking into Berkeley soda tax revenue, which he referenced multiple times, I figured I must not understand how public health works. Raeann has experience working specifically with alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and I asked her about this comment from Dr. Brownell.
Let's say you take the coca leaf in its natural form. It's not, people might derive mild pleasure from chewing it, or consuming it, but people can live in harmony with it. They don't abuse it. But if that gets processed into cocaine, or if it gets ultra processed into crack cocaine, it's very hard for people to live in harmony with it. And then all bets are off, and you get highly addictive things going on, and people will ruin their lives for access to these drugs. So the question is, what is it the same thing when you take sugar and you put it in and you process it into a highly palatable beverage, or if you take corn and turn it into a Cheeto, or wheat and turn it into a Twinkie, or things like that? Does the same principle apply? And do those foods then become difficult for the body to recognize, to metabolize, to live in harmony with? Do they create addictive processes and things like that? And more, the answer to those questions seem to be that all bets are off when people consume these things. It really creates a mess.
So with the baby food, baby formula, let's say like protein powders that people are selling, or like whatever it is there the same concern for those things as others?
Yes, I'm less knowledgeable about the baby formula type products in particular, but I'm assuming the same principles would apply.
Raeann had this to add.
Both food and substances can activate brain reward systems or dopamine release in similar ways. But the important part is around how much dopamine is released and how prolonged it is. So that is wildly different, causing more like physiological dependence with certain substances that we just wouldn't see it to that level in food and sugar. That's why we see more major life impacts with more addictive substances.
In this conversation, she also gets into which sweetened beverages are taxed and why. Dr. Brownell also said that the field was starting to snipe at itself over the definition of ultra-processed foods. It was an interesting comment considering that I mentioned Dr. Robert Lustig, a colleague of Dr. Brownell's, at the top of the episode. Dr. Lustig has told me multiple times that we can create healthy, ultra-processed foods, and has sent me his research on this. So if to snipe is to make a sly or petty verbal attack, I think it's important to know who is sniping at whom and why. And to note who is considered to snipe at who. If 2 establishment researchers disagree, is it not sniping? And is it sniping to wonder why there are different interpretations of research when accounting for confounding variables, clear mislabeling and understanding of food science? And separately, not looking at the research yet feeling comfortable comparing baby formula to crack, which has gasoline and ammonia in it, might not be a good understanding of nutrition and policy. Thanks to the person who checked in on my mental health after the episode dropped, I've gotten used to the authority people think they have when talking over me, and it says a lot about them. Someone else noted that taxing poor kids in order to build playgrounds for them doesn't seem like great policy, something I got to talk to Raeann and Blake about. And I want to note that soda taxes do reduce soda consumption in communities and have been used to fund important programs like preschool in some cities, which is truly great. and what happens to these programs once a goal of scant purchase of sugar-sweetened beverages is achieved. At the end, I'll add one more note from Raeann about the front of package labeling that is highly esteemed by folks in the nutrition research community, and it's tied to tobacco products. Raeann, Blake, and I met up at an outdoor brewery to record this conversation and celebrate Blake's birthday. With 3 of us in different counties and with different schedules, combining this chat with an event was the only way to do it. Hopefully the background noise contributes to the casual vibes of the chat. And a note that the terms healthy food and unhealthy food are used in this episode in the context of my conversation with Dr. Brownell and the terms that he uses. Remember that the foods that are best for you are the healthy foods. Yesterday, I was talking with a kiddo about the frozen chocolate-filled waffles he found at Whole Foods and how great they are because they're tasty and calorically dense. That combo is healthy and necessary for his body right now. And with that, here's the interview. Oh, introduce yourselves.
Hello, my name is Blake Flaugher, and I have been a public health professional for, about 12 years now.
Okay.
And I'm Raeann Bowlds. I have also been in public health for not quite as long, but about 11 years.
First question, is crack the same as Cheetos?
I can see the confusion. However, Cheetos are almost as addicting, so I can see why people would think that.
Have you done both, and did you find them as addicting?
I have done Cheetos, but not crack.
Okay. Raeann, any thoughts?
Well, I would think that I could live in harmony with Cheetos.
Yes.
I do live in harmony with Cheetos.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to say not the same thing.
I am thinking that people might lose their jobs or their livelihood over crack, but maybe not over Cheetos. Maybe.
It's fair.
Yes. Raeann, tell us about the addictive neurotransmitters in the brain.
If we're looking at the top 5 addictive substances.
Yes.
Cheetos or food-related products will not make that list, though there may be addictive properties to foods.
Okay.
Yes, the neural pathways will look quite different than those that we would see with, opioids, nicotine, yes, cocaine, etc.
Cocaine, etc. Meth. What did you all think of the episode itself? Like, what did you take away after hearing Dr. Brownell say his things?
I mean, food policy is complex, but I really appreciated when he was talking about how, treating like sugary sweetened products or food basically like other addictive substances. Like when you look at tobacco, used to be marketed to children, and then regulations got put on that. And then it talks about, like in public health, we talk about price elasticity. So, raising the cost of something so that people don't use it. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting, applying both to, because my expertise is not in food policy nor tobacco policy. So, but yeah, I can see the parallels.
Yeah, and I can see the parallels for sure too. I think I'll probably speak even more to this because of having focused a lot on, tobacco, specifically in higher ed and tobacco-free campus policies. But the similarities are definitely there because both with tobacco and with sugar tax, they're controversial, right? They're also both, they have good intentions behind the folks that are trying to do this work. And from a public health perspective, I do understand those intentions, right? Like if we're impacting policy, we might have more potential to make an impact. However, there are some very fundamental differences.
Okay.
So the first thing that comes to mind is we're comparing, the number one preventable cause of death. There's no safe cigarette. We're comparing that to food, something we use to nourish our bodies and live, and we can have pretty much anything when it comes to food in moderation. I see that as a pretty fundamental difference, and then the other big one that I'll mention is is youth and the impacts that tobacco tax and different restrictions have on youth. That's a really large intention behind that, because if we can stop youth from initiating use, once you make it past the age of 26, you're almost like, it's way less likely that you're going to pick up any sort of nicotine product. So by taxing them, that does take a harder hit to young folks who aren't able to afford it or access it in the same way, which just doesn't apply as much. Now the marketing, I see the parallels with the marketing, right? The targeting. But tobacco's way sneakier. Tobacco's making sweatshirts that kids can use in class to vape, right? And disguising.
Wait, tell us more.
Yeah. So the
list.
little strings that hang down from your hoodie.
Okay.
I don't know if they still exist, but when I was doing the work back, 6 or 8 years ago, I remember, they had in those strings, like the very end of them could be a vaping device.
Wow.
So sneaky. I mean, the marketing that goes back decades, right? So there was that study in the 90s about how kids recognized Joe Marble at the same rate as Mickey
camel.
Mouse. Yep.
Yeah.
And the camel, right? And then the candies.
Yeah.
The flavors. Like, are you going to see like a grown person? Maybe. There's some people having like mango flavored vape products and candies, but yeah, it's just, they're very different. But I will say that I understand why we would take a successful example and try to apply that elsewhere. But there's also just so many more confounding factors when we're talking about sugar and the impacts on health, because exercise, like where is exercise in all of this, right? Or adverse childhood experiences and mental health and stress and all of these other things. Whereas tobacco was just so much more of a clear-cut example. So we're taking this example and applying it to something way more complex.
You mentioned the exercise of it all, and that reminds me of, first of all the gels and chews that somebody is going to use when they're exercising, and how nobody is like, maybe you should stay away with that. But that also then reminds me of like the mocktail of it all. And rarely are people looking at their spritz or whatever it is and shaming other people for drinking those. But, if I were to pick up an Arizona iced tea and walk around with it, the people would be like, you're gross. But, yeah, so they're just different in class. And I'm wondering, for the tobacco piece, was it marketed mostly or somewhat to black and brown kids more than others, or was it just like across the board?
Oh, yes, definitely targeted more towards black and brown kids.
And then queer communities and...
Oh, yes. It is a known thing that tobacco is marketed much more heavily toward queer and trans youth. Specifically, I can't think of any specific evidence for this, again, because it's not my area of expertise, but knowing the levels of stress and anxiety that queer youth have. And then, wow, that's an easy way to get someone hooked on something that'll make them feel a little better, So I think industries exploit in that way.
I remember queer bars in the, I'm not going to date myself, when it was early 2000s? Queer bars in the early 2000s. And the going out for a smoke break was like the cool kids, and if you wanted to talk to somebody one-on-one and they were going out for a smoke break, you would go out and either just like stand there while they were smoking or like smoke too. And specifically queer bars. I can't speak to the straights and what goes on there, but yeah, the just allure of the cigarette in those spaces was interesting.
Yes. As a former smoker, which I'm not anymore, thank God, it was like the hardest thing I ever had to do was quit smoking. But
there you go.
It was such exactly, but it was such an easy way to be social and make friends and conversation, because you're alone in a bar. Oh, I'll go out back and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
And there'd be a table full of people.
Yeah.
Hey, you got a light? You got a cigarette?
Yeah.
And everyone would just talk, and so there's that aspect to it too.
The other parallel that's coming to mind that is valid is the targeting, right? So targeting of marginalized communities, both with tobacco and what I have heard, again, not my area of expertise either, but when it comes to certain food products, I've heard this from the marketing as well. I don't know if that's like an argument that's being made to appeal to certain folks, but it's definitely an argument that I've heard in the media,
Right.
as a way to say, you know, big food, big sugar. I don't.
Yep.
Okay.
Both. Yeah.
Anyway, most familiar with big tobacco, but a tactic that, you know, food marketing is using. But the thing that I always think about with food is I'm like, is it? I understand that it's controversial and like so many people are going to disagree, but I'm like, is it a crime to make things pleasurable and taste good? Like, you know, of course these companies are trying to make food that we want to eat and buy again. So, like, I get it, and I think that it just comes down to, like, why is passing the cost to the consumer and these communities, like, the best solution to address that? Like, I think it's human, and we should all be able to have these foods sometimes if we want them or craving them, and there just has to be a better solution. So, you know, all that being said, being in public health, I do understand that if we can impact the larger, you know, picture, systematic policy, you know, type approaches, that we can make more of an impact. And just with this particular example, it does feel like we should be doing more, like have a more comprehensive approach. So yeah, it's a very tough one, and it's complicated, and I have lots of mixed feelings.
Okay, actually, I'm so glad that you said that, because it reminds me, so there was an AIDS activist who passed from AIDS-related complications named Bob Rasky.
Okay.
And I forget the exact quote, but he said, basically, why put people out to pasture for doing a human thing? You know, seeking pleasure, wanting more happiness, something that's going to relieve stress and anxiety, even temporarily. Like, I think one thing that we all have to grapple with is that there's morality discussions embedded within public health discussions, and what all of that looks like culturally and socially, and I don't know. That's what that reminded me of. Yeah. Because, like, when you think about it, it makes me think more about harm reduction and, like, oh, should we be cutting out soda altogether, or should we just be telling people that it'll do XYZ to your bodies after long-term use, but not attach morality to it. So anyway,
that's interesting. The black and brown kid marketing of it all, I will hear that one from journalists, from policy folks all the time. Like, it's a problem. Marketing is a problem because we're targeting it more to black and brown kids, and they're more vulnerable. And the question is never like why. And when why is asked, it's always like the companies know that black and brown kids are going to eat more of it if they're marketed to. I'm like, is it if they're marketed to, or is it like the corner store is the only place that they're going to get something? Exactly. So if it's Arizona iced tea or a Snapple, like, can I make it a Arizona iced tea with this marketing? They talk about fast food. I'm like, is fast food the only thing that's there? Are we trying to go McDonald's versus Burger King? So I'm like, is it the marketing? Yes, but why? Why is it happening? Because if that's the only option, I'm gonna maybe get the Arizona iced tea. But what if we put a grocery store there? Like, would it be as, you know, compelling? That's a word, I guess.
Well, and again, you bring up a good point. So, you know, in public health, we know that many, many studies have shown that where you grow up, your zip code determines your life expectancy. Yeah. Like, that's a pretty that's a pretty well-known thing. And so we think about, like, why that is, and it's, like you said, it's like your environment. It's like, what is in your environment that allows you to make, quote, healthier choices compared to those who don't have those same resources or access.
People who don't have choices. Is that
exactly.
What you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
People who can
forced
make
choices.
Yeah, people who can make choices are people with more money and more access to resources.
Yes.
But other people don't get choices to make is always interesting to me. So Dr. Brownell was a big fan of Berkeley. You and all of us, live close to Berkeley. I have a particular vision for Berkeley, which is very white, like very starkly demographically different, like really rich white people, and then the black and brown folks who were closer to Oakland or other places. And so that being an example of a soda tax is interesting to me because the use of black and brown kids, especially in that community, hits me differently because of their like pawnness in this like campaign to reduce soda. If we're looking at white rich kids, like in some research it shows that they're drinking less, in some it's the same, but we're not using like soda or whatever as the problem. We're seeing that black and brown kids who drink soda are the problem, which is always interesting to me. But I think that's just because I am familiar with that community. And so do we care about those kids, or is this like a virtue signaling of Berkeley? Like, we have a soda tax in Berkeley. I don't know. I don't know.
Again, I don't know. I would like to see the data to see who is most affected by those soda taxes, or who drinks the most soda, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
I don't have that data. What I will say is, like, what you're saying reminds me of, in public health, it's like there's always a balance between trying to show who is most affected by a certain policy or quote unhealthy behavior, but then also not stigmatizing them. So it's like, if black and brown young children are the ones actually drinking the most soda and having the worst health outcomes from drinking sugary sweetened beverages, for example, it would make sense to me that their needs are centered. But that would have to be done very, very carefully. I'm not sure that I would choose putting a poor, exactly. I'm not sure that I would put, you know, a black or brown child on a billboard saying this issue only affects them. It has to be done more, more thoughtfully.
So you wouldn't say share diabetes with Maria?
I would not say share diabetes with Maria. No, I would not.
You would not.
Right,
Okay.
because that would obviously stigmatize a whole community.
And be
which is
like
the opposite goal of what we should be doing.
Those billboards are wild.
Yeah.
And what I thought was super interesting is that I said that in the episode, and Dr. Brownell was like, basically like, yeah, that one was good, as well as the one with the like soda injecting into an arm. Like, yeah, but then Big Soda.
You said that was good?
Yeah,
They had it taken.
But Big Soda
that one taken down.
had took it down, and I was like, but this is not okay. Like,
No.
not okay. Yeah, I think that he was saying, yes, that was effective marketing, as was this one, but then Big Soda had something to say about it. And actually, from that, let me hear what you two think. This is a lot of the Jesica aligns with Big Soda if she thinks that billboard is not okay. Like, Big Soda, Big Sugar must be what she believes in and is making money from, because she has questions about public health and policy and those things. What do you think?
I'm just going to say, as someone in public health, I think we do not do great jobs sometimes with our counter marketing. I mean, just, you shared the share diabetes with Maria example, but even just on my drive today, saw one that was a soda can, and the soda can was labeled tooth decay. And I'm thinking, I know, it's like,
because that's the only thing that causes tooth decay.
Yeah, well,
right.
And it's just so bad because it goes back to like the comparisons I was making to tobacco with moderation, and how it's possible with foods and drinks to practice moderation, but in their safe amounts, but not with tobacco and cigarettes. So I'm thinking, well, like, I have soda occasionally, and you're basically saying, like, because I drank that soda is tooth decay. I just don't think that that's true. I've lived 35 plus years, and I drink soda, and I don't think I have tooth decay. Same with type 2 diabetes. I've seen that billboard too. I think it must be part of the same series, because again, it's just like simply a soda can that says type 2 diabetes. And I'll just say that I thought public health professionals knew that wasn't effective, right? Like, we found from tobacco marketing that was very similar, where it was like, the black lungs and the tar and all these scare tactics, like we found very clear evidence that those were not resonating.
Okay.
And that was too negative to be effective. And so it flipped in the last decade to be more positive marketing, which sounds interesting because you're like, how do you make anti-tobacco marketing positive? But it was like, and they did a good job because they did focus groups with youth, and they heard they went to the community. This is public health 101. You go to the community, you ask them what will resonate, then you pilot it, right? Like, I'm like, did they take this soda can that says type 2 diabetes and ask people what they thought? Yeah. Because I'd be shocked. But anyway, we found that the messaging around these communities are being targeted by big tobacco, don't be a target. And there was one with cats, you should look it up, Truth Campaign. There were cats, it was cat videos of them doing all these things, and it was showing these awesome stats about how tobacco use has gone down. And so it was this positive, and there was this good music playing, and they found that those were way more effective with youth who were their target audience. So anyway, I think marketing for public health is really challenging, and I get why we don't always do it well, but I just imagine people sitting around a table and someone says this idea and then they're like, yeah, let's do it, and then they make it into a billboard, and without the thought or the research or the focus groups or the piloting or going to the community, and these are all just public health concepts that I'm like, where do these people miss these basic concepts? So anyway.
Well, yeah, and also the public health field, it's been shown time and time again, scare tactics don't work. Yeah. You tell people, or you try to show people what the healthier options are. You promote well-being and health. You don't shame, quote, unhealthiness. Or, but also with the advertisement with a Coke can or whatever kind of soda that says tooth decay on it. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I am from Southern or Central Appalachia, Eastern Kentucky, and there is a stereotype there Mountain Dew mouth. The kids will have Mountain Dew mouth. Oral health is statistically on a public health level the worst in the country. And there is a lot of soda consumption there, but it's would that ad work differently in Eastern Kentucky with parents who don't want their children to have tooth decay than Berkeley with so I don't know, I'm not saying that was an effective ad, I'm just saying local context is so important. And it often gets ignored.
I remember in Oregon the meth mouth. Oh god, terrifying. You'd be flipping through their local paper or whatever and just freeze and want to vomit and move on. But I am not gonna I was not thinking about meth in the first place. This is not going to deter me from starting meth. This is just terrifying, and it's not going to make somebody who does meth feel good and want to. It's just going to.
It's shameful.
Right. It's terrible.
You also reminded me of the PIE approach, right? In public, a public health little framework. It's ads to resonate are usually supposed to be positive, inclusive, and empowering, right? And I think we can all say that those ones we just mentioned are not any of those things. And then it's even better if it's pied with a D because it's also doable, right? Exactly. And so if we can give someone tools, a doable, tangible thing, right?
Thank you, Polly Paulson.
I was going to say that too. I remember when it's introduced to you all, you were saying it all the time.
Oh no, well now that's just embarrassing. We haven't changed at all. But I wanted to mention that when you were talking about that's just not the tactic we should be taking. And I take that another step further to say education only goes so far. And I get a little bit tired of hearing people talk about we just need to educate people because it goes back to what you were saying, Jessica, where it's we can give them these are highly nutritious foods, these are great beverage alternatives, etc. But what if they don't have access to that in their community, right? Yeah. And so I will say that even though I have these opinions about public health marketing and education and how that should be done, it really is all part of this bigger picture where we need more large-scale comprehensive approaches that are actually changing systems and the way policy works and all of that. So I am pro policy. It's also just very difficult to do, right? And so this particular example, my big issues with it are that it's not taking into factor other large contributors to health, the ones they mentioned, exercise, for example, and the community that they live in, all of these things. And then secondly, just that it's very narrow. Like, to tax just soda, and I get it, it's the single most contributor to sugar in our diets, right? Is that correct? Okay. So I get that, but also it just feels like, well, what about the drinks you were mentioning, and what about Starbucks? Like, are coffees taxed? Because look at the people who are going and spending $7 on a whatever latte.
Yeah.
Right? All those words that go in front of it.
Frappuccino.
You know, and I'm like, those are arguably probably have more than a soda, especially if you're getting grande.
Yes.
And we apparently are not worried about taxing
richer people.
The demographic
whiter,
can
richer
afford
people.
The $8 coffee, which I'm, I guess I do occasionally, but it's like it's obscenely expensive now, and I'm like, add the $3 to that and see what we I mean, I don't know. It's tricky.
And adjacently, like, we don't know what we're eating anyway. Like, we don't know. I can't tell you what the hell's in my food.
It's fair.
Most of the time.
Yeah, it's fair.
Which goes back to the environment. And one thing that's been really disturbing over the last several months is that, research is coming out that shows people are getting stomach and colon cancer at younger and younger ages.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is in our diet that's causing that we don't know what it is yet? And so, I don't know. I think sometimes there's the illusion of choice of what we put in our bodies, because we don't always know.
Yeah. So, Berkeley, again.
We love Berkeley.
I might be obsessed. It's okay. It's just close. That's all.
Yeah.
Quick look through of what they funded last fiscal year. Nutrition education. Right? So all of this policy, Raeann, like you were saying, we're getting to education. They got a school garden. And I'm like, that's great. Is somebody going to sit in that garden and get all their produce from it? Like, because that sounds nice. I mean, granted, I understand you're learning where your food comes from, but, like, that's nice if you can go out and buy it. Otherwise, that carrot I just pulled is really cute and nice, but what's the long-term benefit? Is that carrot going to replace all the sugar? Which, like, I don't know. They did see, like, a reduction in soda, sugar-sweetened beverages, which is nice. Increase in water. Love it. And, like, what else are we doing to, make these communities healthy as they, proclaim to do?
Yeah. And can I just say, gardening is so much work.
It is so, and so much water. Oh my God.
People.
Yes.
I'm also just like, okay, but who's actually taking, I love that they're doing it. Like, don't get me wrong. I love that they're doing that. It sounds great.
Yeah.
I wish that they had a better way to fund things like that than taxing the communities that are buying the soda to then offer them these things that I wish we would offer them anyway. So I love the gardening, but just like from a practical standpoint, are we then having gardens at home? Like, that's a really challenging thing to do.
I spend like 10 gallons of water to make one tomato, and it's like, it's so much cheaper.
That's wild.
It's wild. You gotta water it from a baby to like a whole ass plant, and you get one tomato. And I'm like, wait, I could have bought it. I needed to buy it.
Yeah, it reminds me of an image I saw. Like, it's like a picture of like a tomato, and it was like best like $78 dollars I ever spent. By the time you buy the soil and like the garden bed and like all the things that go into it. But again, I really just want to reiterate that I do love the community garden aspect.
Yes.
I think it's. No, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. Wish we had more of it. But yeah, just again, it's like the means that we are using to do that is like fascinating to me, right? So, yeah.
Plus, with gardening, like instant gratification.
Look at your face. What?
Yeah, like, I'm sorry. I'm hungry. I don't want to wait a couple months for a tomato.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I do know.
So convenience has to be factored in too.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes. I go to the farmer's market on Sundays only because my dad goes, and that's something that we do together. And stuff is cheap there. But that's like 3 hours on a Sunday in one particular place. And that is not, realistic. Or like the people who are there, the people who can afford both these super expensive eggs and meat, like the quail eggs, and also the produce. And I am there for the gamification of how low can I spend on a tomato, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what everybody's there for. It's interesting. The flower
And eggs
market
are going up, by the way.
So maybe having a chicken is more cost effective. But also it's 1 chicken, 1 egg a day. Just gotta say it.
Unless you have 17 hens.
Is that you, Raeann?
Yes.
We won't talk about the time she locked herself in the chicken coop.
That did happen, and I was really scared. I live with wonderful neighbors, though, so I had an out.
That's good.
I do remember, I feel like there have been a couple lost thoughts, but I do remember one of them. And Jessica, I don't know if this is a question for you, if you know, but I think my question as well becomes, if the goal, and also I want to clarify that I never said the goal was no soda. I think a soda here and there is great. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, if the goal is a reduction in these sugar-sweetened beverages, then to me it would make sense if the money went towards alternative beverages that they can then purchase, right? Whether that looks like some sort of discount or subsidies or some sort of, I don't know, somewhere in there, wouldn't it be something that would more directly impact the nutrition of those communities, right? Positively impact the beverages that they're choosing. And it sounds like they did choose more water, but why would the money not go there? So that's, do you have any knowledge around like why? Because again, all these things sound great. Who's going to argue?
They do.
Who's going to argue with, we're going to use this money and improve schools or build playgrounds or have community gardens? Of course, that sounds great, but I would just go back to the original goal. If the original goal is access to food that are not necessarily like sugar sweetened beverages, then why is our money not going there?
Well, yeah, and Dr. Brownell said we want things to go back into subsidizing produce. And I said, so is that happening?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right? And he was like, so Berkeley has this community of people, committee of people who talk about these things. And I was like, that's...
To each other.
Right.
Which is also important, but wouldn't it be lovely if we lived in a country that valued education and putting money into our K through 12 public schools?
Weird.
Right?
Weird.
Crazy concept.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be wild if they had playgrounds and, preschool without relying on a soda tax? Yeah. To implement a tax, to need a tax on soda to build a playground or to have free preschool is terrifying. But here we are.
Well, and we kind of saw this several years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but whenever New York City was making waves because you couldn't get like a supersized soda in New York City.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, everyone's going to be so much more healthier. And it's like, so they're going to get 32 ounces instead of 44? Like, what is...
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I mean, I would almost say I would agree with that more, though.
Okay,
limiting
if we're
rather
like
than
a slightly,
smaller size, and you can still get it and not be paying. I guess it's like this concept, like I'm oversimplifying it here, but this concept of like, let's pass the cost to the community, who's then going to pay for their playground in their school, right? Like
taxing Black and brown kids to then, put a playground in your area. Like, what?
Yeah, they deserve that regardless. We all do. All communities. Yep.
Well, and I might be trying to get too deep for what I'm able to do right now. But whenever your last interview, they were talking about seeing food as a human right.
Oh, yeah.
And so to me, that would be like, okay, not tying nutrition to capitalism, right? And like, who can afford the healthy versus unhealthy things and the quote ultra processed and all these different nuances. Like, why can't we just all have good nutritious food?
Weird.
Yeah, but it becomes, companies don't have incentives to do healthy things because usually the unhealthy things are what's good and convenient and tasty and cheap and so that has to be
thank you for bringing that up. So on board with having policy around water, so on board with having policy around air. If we get to food and making sure that healthy food is available, like he didn't go much further than, targeting marketing and putting, what's healthy and what's not on labels. And I'm like, again, with your tie to capitalism. And also, how is that the same as having clean air and clean water? I don't understand. Yeah. How is that the answer? Yeah.
Right. Which leads into more basic needs question like water, air, food, shelter.
Nice.
Most of those are, you need money, or you live in the wrong part of town, or you don't have an education. So everything is so tied up, and I don't think everyone truly realizes how intersectional all these issues are. Because if we think about food as a human right, we will pay all the workers who are all through that pipeline well, and we'll make sure that healthy food is prioritized, or there's such a different way to think about this.
But let's label food. Okay?
Right. Yep.
People will make the healthier choice with their dollar.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, I'm terrified. Raeann, Blake, thank you so much to coming out to a brewery where we're drinking mocktails that have sugar and alcohol. And also alcohol. I appreciate you both. I'm so glad that I met you.
Yes.
Likewise, Jessica. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much.
Blake will bring you back to talk about sex.
Yep, we're doing it.
Okay.
Thanks to Blake and Raeann for coming on the show. It will be easy for some people to listen to this and say that I want people to drink soda all day and all night. They might say that I'm funded by Big Sugar or Big Soda, and maybe even that I want to share diabetes with Maria. I may get another 1,100-word blog post in my honor. And if all of this happens, we know how basic folks are. And that's fine. They can snipe away. And if folks can see that, 1, nutrition education is not policy or changing an environment. 2, that programs in cities will have consistently declining funding and wonder if that's good policy. And then 3, wonder if soda taxes might be seen as a solution to social determinants of health and food apartheid. And then question the performative aspects of the taxes. Then let's be friends. And to be clear, I'm not against a decrease in sugar consumption. I do question that just because it's easy to get support for something, that the money and energy is best spent there. Dr. Brownell said if we all agree on an easy thing to change, then we should start there. But to me, if cities truly care about the Black and brown kids they use in their soda tax marketing, they will do more than easy. And as I mentioned, Raeann had one more thought about the connection between marketing of food and tobacco. Raeann at the end mentioned the redundancy of these messages and how if they're everywhere, they don't matter. They just become background noise.
Yeah, I think, well, 2 things. First of all, they found this with tobacco packaging where they put the gruesome pictures on it. People just became like, they don't see it anymore, right? Yeah. So actually they had more success with plain packaging, so it does remind me a little of that. But I have family, who lives in Mexico, and often when I'm visiting, we end up at grocery stores, and I just was astounded at how pretty much all of the snack options, like everything will have these 3 icons on them: excess sodium, excess sugar, and excess fat. And it's almost like you stop seeing it, and also you're not finding, it's almost as if the other options aren't available.
All right, and that's it for today, folks. Next week is a guest that I am just so excited about. If you have access to Netflix, watching the first episode of the latest season of Great British Bake Off will help you to prepare. Until then, friends, keep it awkward. This episode is brought to you by Crack, Cheetos, Arizona iced tea, Frosted Flakes, and Snapple. It's supported by the Patreon members of this podcast and my book, It's Always Been Ours, and is also edited by Jen Jacobs, who will never, ever snipe. You can get awkward merch on my website, and don't forget that Sacramento Outboard Services supports the show and will be mad if I don't mention that in the end of an episode. All right, take care.